Today we're going to talk about multiplying integers. So I can multiply integers using the multiplication rules. On your page we're going to be writing, we can determine the outcome of a product. Remember, product is the answer to a multiplication problem, by observing the total number of negatives. So we're looking at negatives being multiplied together. So let's look at this. If I had 0 negatives, no negatives at all in my problem, it was just a positive 3 times a positive 3. My outcome is going to be positive. Let's try if we had 1 negative, okay? So this time I had a positive 3 times a negative 3. Well, my answer would end up being negative. Let's do 2 negatives. So if I had a negative 3 times a negative 3, my answer would end up being positive. Now, why is that? 2 negatives end up making it positive. 0 negatives make it positive. Let's do 3. 3 negatives. So negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3. My answer would end up being negative. Let's do 4 negatives. So a negative 3 times a negative 3 times a negative 3 times a negative 3. My answer is going to end up being positive. Let's talk about why this is. If you look at the numbers here, 0, 2, 4 end up being positive. Well, I see even numbers. 1 and 3 are odd numbers, and the answers are negative. So if you look over here, if we have an odd number of negatives, then the outcome will be negative. But here we go. If we have an even number of negatives, then the outcome will be positive. So an odd number of negatives is going to keep it negative. An even number of negatives is going to change it to positive. So let's do an example here. Negative times negative times negative times negative 25 times. So think of 25 times. We wrote negative 1 times negative 1 times negative 25 times. Well, the number 25 is an odd number. 5 is odd. So that tells me my answer is going to be negative. And what's 1 times 1 times 1 times 1 times 1? Well, the answer is just going to be 1. So my answer is negative 1. So let's do some of these notes in here then and see what we get. If it's a positive times a positive, well, that's 2 positives, no negatives at all. So my answer is going to be positive. What is a positive times a negative? Well, that's 1 negative. 1 negative makes it negative because it is an odd number. So my answer is going to be negative. Look at this one, a negative times a positive. So they just switched the order. But again, it's 1 negative. So the answer is going to be negative because it's an odd amount. 1 is an odd number. So again, it's going to be negative. So we've got those 3 written so far. Now the last one, negative times negative. Well, 2 negatives makes it a positive because it's an even number of negatives. 1, 2, 2 is an even number. So our answer there will have to be positive. Okay. So let's do some examples of these. So a positive times a positive. It says it's going to be positive. 12 times 3 is 36. Let's look at this one. A positive times a negative. A positive and a negative means that our answer is going to be negative. So it's a negative 36. This time it's a negative times a positive. It has to be negative because, again, it's an odd number of negatives. So it's still going to be negative 36. And now this one, 2 negatives, that's an even number of negatives. 2 is even, so it's going to change back to positive 36. Okay, so now we have our practice problems to do. And you're gonna see a couple different examples here. This one, it looks like you're gonna have to count how many negatives you have. Same with this one, how many negatives. Now here, let's keep in mind, remember, when you have parentheses and then another parentheses, it's the same as saying -1 times -3 times 5. The reason that we're gonna get used to starting to do this is because when you put an X, sometimes people think it's a variable and we think it's a number that's missing. So that's why we're gonna get used to seeing parentheses. So when you see parentheses touching like that, it means they're multiplying. Okay, let's see. The dot also means multiplication that you're seeing. And then here, they're giving you an amount of times. Look to see if it's odd or even. And same down here, see if it's odd or even. All right, good luck with it.